Good morning, good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, Value First Nation. Welcome to a new series called The Value Path here with Joshua Oakes. How are we doing today, sir?
I am doing all right. How are you?
Doing well on this Thursday, November 13th. Excited to dig into a topic that I cannot stop thinking about. And if you know me and how I like to talk about things. I'm going to do my best in this series to try to bridge the gap between theory and practical without going. I think it's the challenge for me is um, is really finding that balance when we talk about customer experiences, and I think this is evident in a lot of the diagrams that we work from and that's available to us. You have these like high level things like the flywheel, for example, or loop marketing, or you have like here's the sales process document and here are the stages, and how can we talk about better process and better experiences without being too high level all the time and without getting in the weeds of how a CRM is set up, right? Because that's when we start to. I mean, in both cases, you lose the thread very quickly.
Right.
But we're gonna do our best to describe a better way that you know uh, that I've been talking about throughout the year. Again, this is a theoretically better way, right? Trying to help people understand how to implement and operationalize it, but to really make good on the promise of let's be, customer focused, customer driven. Let's care about what the customers are doing instead of, building around what we want all the time as a business. Is that a fair goal?
Yeah, I mean, I would think also the a meaningful thing to say here at this point is there is this is a pretty good time for businesses of all size to be thinking about this because of it's still kind of leading indicators on behaviors changes in how people are behaving on their journey to make a purchase that are introduced by AI that is going to obviate some of the things that we have been doing in the ways that we have been thinking about these problems previously, which didn't work in a lot of cases to begin with, right? So we kind of have like gasoline being thrown on the fire of like, it's time to like think about a better way for the people involved.
Yeah. Um, and to do that throughout this series, um, so in the past, you might have seen me like show like Canva diagrams, and it's either like the Canva diagram completely detached from any systems, or it's like here's properties in HubSpot, and here's like, right. Trying to bridge that gap with a new app that I've been working on throughout the week, like creating some visuals that can hopefully, help people start to connect this to things that really they tell us that they want, out of their CRM. Uh, but it's very hard to visualize unless you go through like a whole project, with somebody. And so I'm excited to start using this kind of teaching aid throughout a lot of the content, but definitely in this series, we're going to put it through its paces. And one of the things I've started doing recently uh, to tie, the business, like how to make it about the customers so that it's also about the business, right? Because as soon as you say like customer at all costs, it's easy to say, well, we gotta have margin, we gotta have, we gotta know what's going on our side. I've started working with these four unified goals. We're not going to dig in super deep here, um, but unified customer view, unified revenue view, unified business context, which is so important for AI right now, right? And then
Yeah.
having those things, then you can actually enable your team effectively with the system that they're working in my opinion. Would it be fair to say that, most leaders have goals like this, even if they think they're not necessarily achievable sometimes?
Yes. Although the other failure mode is thinking that they have all of those things
Yes.
because there's some poor person in the organization who has at the end of the quarter 60 hours of work to do to like produce the slide decks and the reports that imply unified context and revenue view and so on. We often think that we have these things when we don't.
Right. And, you know, and in those cases, and I mean, in 99% of cases, it's outside of the system somewhere
Yeah.
inside of people's heads or in slide decks or in all these places where we curate all the information that we know we need, especially unified customer view. Like, right, usually that's in the head of, the sales rep or the account manager or somebody that has done the work to bring all this context together. And honestly, in most cases, we don't have we don't have good places for them to use the system even to put it somewhere that's not in their head. And if we can do anything in this series, it's about creating that space for to achieve these goals with the systems that you're in. Um, so the value path, as a reminder, is based in 8 stages. Right? Audience, somebody saying I'm learning. Researcher, somebody saying I'm researching. Hand raiser, guess what? They're raising their hand for help. Buyer, serious interest, probably other people involved that they gotta get into the buying mode. Value creator, okay, we've got a contract in place. We paid you some money. Some exchanges happened, and now I gotta do something to actually create value based on that exchange. Adopter, uh, I'm not just using the thing. I feel the value. I understand the value, and I'm probably asking you for more value because of that. Advocate, sharing success internally and externally, but really close, like in your immediate, vicinity. And champions, you know, I I'd say like that's people like us for HubSpots, just getting out there, beating the drum, trying to create new ways of thinking, new ways of strategically, you know, helping with understanding of what HubSpot is as a business and what it can do. Right? That's like champions are out there banging that drum, figuring out new drums to bang, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Um,
Yeah.
what this enables is we're gonna uh, work through this example of kind of old way versus new way, and throughout this series, going to try and keep it in perspective. We know that all the systems are still in place, right? We know you're looking at leads and MQLs and SQLs every day, and we're telling you we'd like you to stop doing that, but it's easier said than done. So hopefully we can show this constant comparison of and maybe create a bridge, to go from where we're at to where we're suggesting you need to be. So you shared just this morning, like tell us about the downloads PDF thing that is usually happening.
Yeah. The um, we've all experienced, right? Either being inside or being the, if you will, victim of a business that tries to offer you some information, a gated download content of some kind, a PDF. In most like B2B sales processes, you want the information in the PDF. Maybe it's a research report, maybe it's a playbook or whatever. You give them your name and your work email. You get the PDF, probably downloaded and in my experience, skim it for 2 minutes or less and then never open it again. Like, oh, this is a good thing to come back to. But the business is oriented around that being a signal of some kind that you are in the usually consideration stage of the traditional awareness, consideration, decision, customer journey abstraction. And it kicks off on the back end, right? A whole host of automations and outreaches and, maybe enriching your data, and then you get a text, even though you didn't give anybody your SMS and maybe didn't, or your phone number, and maybe didn't even opt into SMS in the CRM, which is a no-no. But the decision had been made long before you downloaded that PDF that download, or maybe some scoring on the back end associated with that download, was an indicator to the business that you were somebody that they should be engaging more deeply with. And the way that happens is, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months ago, the business went through a customer journey mapping exercise where they usually construct that map based on their sales process. It almost always reverse engineers from a sales process into a customer journey. Like, I've been a fly on the wall and a participant and trying to steer plenty of those in more productive directions, but it goes something like, oh, well, and then we give them a quote for the service. Well, what happens before that? Oh, we qualify them according to BANT. And what happens before that? Oh, they download a PDF, right? They raise their hand with a white paper, or, they fill out an inquiry form or something like that. That is, again, an attempt to encode an existing sales process and how the CRM operates, to your point earlier, into like a a fake version of how a customer's purchase decision gets made, right? And that PDF that can look like a lot of other things in terms of interactions, right? Like, a lot of people might be experiencing that in a comment download on LinkedIn to get my download, and then you enter into a 47 direct message automation series on LinkedIn, right? Getting harassed for
Yeah.
courses or whatever.
And I think that's a good thing to highlight. Like, at the top here, the same trigger event. Like, we're not asking you to change every single thing, right? Like, PDFs are still good, webinars are still good, demos still necessary, right? But the difference between highlighting where they are in their journey versus where we want them to be for our process is everything. And two really very real examples that come to mind from personal experience, right? Over a year ago, I downloaded, NetSuite checklist or something, right? Still get calls from SDRs. Like, basically, if it's an Austin number, I don't generally talk to people from Austin, but if it's an Austin number, I know it's probably them, right? And if I answer, it's going to be like, oh, we saw you downloaded the thing. How was that for you? Oh, that thing that I downloaded 18 months? Yeah, let me get it out of my back
Right.
pocket right now and tell
Right.
you, no, that's not how it works. The second time, and this is evident of like why we want to fix this infrastructure like now, I got what I'm pretty sure was an AI SDR call that did almost the exact same thing from something I downloaded like 2 Aprils ago, right? And I could tell based on the exchange, the only thing that made me feel better about it is I didn't feel bad about like shutting the and actually it shut the conversation down without any rapport building or anything, right? But that was an AI SDR, and we see people doing that all the time. Like, oh, we're just gonna plug in AI into this like, nope. that's not going to solve any problems at all.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The you know, the fundamental flaw here, right, is that it's exhibited by the symptom of reverse engineering the sales process. Like, oh, somebody, their lead score bumps to a certain position, or they submit a certain form or download a certain asset. That is something that kicks off our process. The symptom of trying to engineer what taking somebody who is, just a stranger on the internet to a customer from your sales process, like that, even that is a symptom of this underlying challenge and problem, which is like we are not adequately investing, which I do mean financially, but I also mean mostly not financially, in understanding what that process is like for our customers, right? And recognizing, even awareness, consideration, decision is customer centric labeling for those kinds of quote stages of that journey, but is not customer centric strategy for them, which is to say, do people need to be aware of you before they consider buying from you? Sure. But that doesn't capture some of the important nuance that Value Path does, which is to say, like, there is a passive awareness stage of a relationship with a prospective customer, and there is an active awareness stage of like researcher, right? And we have some other distinctions in language that people use, like, are they problem aware, are they solution aware? And those can be helpful frameworks in the words of the statistician George Box. All models are wrong, but some are useful. That's also how we translate these abstractions into the implementation that needs to be done so that the CRM reflects how those decisions are made and how we can enable them. But we need to be able to think about the human process and hopefully figure out what those common patterns are from the buyers of a specific product or service from a specific business, which isn't even category aware necessarily, which is to say, two businesses who sell functionally the same product should have different facets of that path to value because they are not serving the exact same customers. They will have similarities where their customer segments overlap, but if you don't have a unique value path for your segments, then you are operating like a commodity, and that's going to be a disadvantage in the long run, right?
Yes.
Like, why do I win better? Why do I win a certain segment more effectively, better at a higher profitability and higher customer sat or whatever than a competitor who sells a similar product? If there's no story there, why do those two businesses even exist? Like, they will converge on the gray goo, right? Finding those distinctions where you can offer value better along the whole path from like audience stage of like, I'm just kind of becoming aware of a product or category that might solve a problem for me. The better you align with how they progress along that decision path and are distinctive, the better your outcomes are going to be.
Yeah. And it needs to be this simple, right? Like if you're out there and you feel like marketing to sales is misaligned, there's friction in every single handoff that your organization makes, marketing to sales to service. Sales is in charge of who's real and who's not. I want you to care about this one too, but I think most of the time we might not. If those are real for you, then we invite you to, continue joining us in this series. If you've got these figured out and these are not problems, like congrats on being like one of the 0.1% unicorns that have figured this out. And honestly, like the amount of resources required to do this, and I think in a lot of ways, although some of the experiences we're describing, like the Fortune 100 and 500 companies are guilty of sometimes, but their systems, like they've done the research, they've done the work, they've done the building, they've done the training of all their teams, like everybody's speaking the same language. Like the best experiences have taken a lot of energy and resources to create, right? They didn't just fall into it, right? It's a lot of intention around building out processes and systems to support the people, right?
Yes, and they do, if they do get all of those gears, they get the machine, a well-oiled machine running effectively. It requires a lot of maintenance. As soon as you have a quarter where you have a different priority or objective, those things that you start to get decay on that system, or you have leadership change, or you have uh, you know uh, incentives around a different product line or whatever, right? Like that stuff starts to break down.
Yep. So if you like the idea, and I've heard all of you say it, like, how do I add value? How do we create value? Like, you can't wait until you get the money, right? You got to figure out a way to do that beforehand. And honestly, every stage, like every touch point needs to do this. Uh, that becomes easier when you can recognize who they are and where they are in their journey as soon as humanly possible. And now, as soon as AI can help you do that too. Um, Continuous context, right? Internally and externally. We don't like when it's internal and we got to come like, hey, sales team, what did you tell them? What did you promise to them? We're trying to implement now. Like, we don't like asking those questions every day, right? So continuous context, repeated questions inside and outside of the organization. Like, if you don't like doing that, and unifying the experience, right? If you think you're going to achieve these things while still adhering to the old framework that put us here in the first place, like, good luck proving the data wrong, right? Like, because it's been in place for 20 years now. Um, in the places who have good implementations, right? Where they actually do all these stages and they do all these playbooks, and still those experiences aren't great on the other side of that, right?
Yeah.
So all we're trying to do is help you rethink through a few different models, some different frameworks, and we're going to get into some examples um, real quick because we know, right? Like, this is what overall is what's the gaps, right? A lot of the challenges when coming into HubSpot, it's like, oh, a system based around contacts. I'm not, what? We sell to humans? Yeah. Like, humans are buying, like, it's not just business logo as much as we might want it to be. Backward movement, right? People, it's not linear. And like, maybe there are some edge cases where it is very linear. We're not talking about those, like, this framework, maybe not for you, right? Post sales revenue, upsell, cross sell, renewals. Every single business on the planet almost has one of those things, right? And they have not found a way to bring them into the journey effectively. Handoff problems we mentioned, and how long business processes actually take based on the decision processes that people are actually going through. Like, all of this, this one for sure, like, the amount of unnecessary urgency that gets created because my close date says the end of the month, or my
Right.
KPIs need to be hit by the end of the month. Like, it's just complete imaginary like world where we think we've been taught that that's how you do business, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
we wonder
Driven mostly
why,
by reporting, not by needing
right?
to deliver value for customers.
And then we wonder why people don't enjoy that experience. It's like, if
Right.
you do get them to buy, it was in the most untrustworthy, like forced way. Like, I didn't want to buy it, but you told me it was a good discount, and I felt the
Right.
need. I had some
Yeah. Discount was
anxiety,
going to expire. Right.
right?
And the funny thing about a lot of these are that if you a lot of this is industry or business specific language differentiation. If you actually go out and talk to the sales teams, you will find a lot of ways that they operate outside of the traditional stage model to deliver value to people all throughout the pipeline where they have access to them, right? Like pre MQL, they might not have access to people, but they just don't. Everybody has their own thing that they've learned over time, which is maybe comes from sales training and not from CRM and isn't represented there, or it's something that they heard from another rep that really worked, right? When you talk to reps and hear like, you know, oh, the thing that I do that every time that is like really helps me close deals is, this is an actual story, is the a rep who's like, yeah, I don't use the estimator or the calculator, the ROI thing. I create a like 1 page business case executive summary that is written in the voice of my internal buyer slash champion. So they are co-participating in the artifact that's going to be used before the meeting to start to like build grassroots buy-in for this big enterprise purchase, right? And it's not part of the sales process. It's not trackable. It's just something that rep does because they learned that like, oh, I close more of these deals, and it takes our language into the meetings long before I'm there with a deck or a demo or whatever. And that is providing value to the person who's in the research stage. The value is the off books value of makes me look smart, helps me prepare for these conversations and be effective, and come in equipped, rather than when somebody says, well, what is that solution? And they have to pull a screen share up and show the company's homepage, which has messaging that isn't always maybe specific to my use case or whatever, right? Like that is very much like that kind of activity is bullseye of value path, right? Like we are solving problems, delivering value for somebody. Doesn't matter what stage of the funnel they are in, or like some of the details of how they make the purchase decision, but that rep provided amazing value to that prospective buyer, right? And it's not something that we could assign a monetary value to because it's all human relationship value. Oh, thank you. This was such a big help to help me like start to build, this internal buy-in, and turned a lot of my question marks into periods. And I have something that I can go forward on and iterate, as part of this process.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we are talking about.
Yeah. And so for a moment, or like throughout this series, like leave the how like at the door a little bit. Like the systems that you have, the systems that you see every day, your spreadsheets, your emails, they're not built to put yourself in the situation where you can create value at every touch point, because you don't always have the context you need. Usually the only people that can do it throughout the entire journey are the full funnel account managers that are a part of every single touch point, right? Which some of the best salespeople I've met, that's exactly why they're the best, right? They own the conversation. They're in a company where the scale required allows them to be, this is my focus, this is my set of accounts. I'm not overburdened. I have personal relationships with every single person on this list. Every touch point becomes valuable in those moments. Now, what we're going to suggest throughout this series is that we can now, with the help of AI, build the systems that allow us to have that level of understanding throughout the entire journey, right? And I'll hit here. We're not going to dive in right now, just so you can screenshot it if you're watching it. We will get into measurement at some point. But for today, we're going to look at a couple different scenarios. And I'm going to start with my baby, manufacturing, right? The place that I'm from. Now, these are all fictitious. Inside of a, CRM-like experience, just to kind of help put the pieces together in that. So let's say this is a manufacturing scenario, right? Timeline of 22 months, a couple different people involved. In this case, we got a director of quality assurance and a plant manager, right? So at this point, we have, the primary champion of the buying process, which is now in the champion stage of the value path. Then we've got the plant manager who was initially skeptical and now he's an advocate, right? That doesn't happen without, experiences of value that build over time, right? So, and if I'm just gonna, right, and like this other person who's not involved in every step of the process likely doesn't go through, all of the stages. So these stages are not meant to be like, all right, everybody is always going to go through all 8 and always in this order, right? It's about every human being has the capacity to be in one of these stages during their experience. It might not make sense for your business based on what you're selling, but as I think about it, we know that these areas, right, adopter, advocate, champion, are often opportunities, especially when you're in the moments of we need more resell, we need more upsell, we need more cross sell, right? It's like, well, your process stopped at close 1.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't care about any of this stuff. You got a bunch of customers, right? So of course, and that's why like it might seem overly complex. But as we go through these examples, and please, like, if you're out there watching, like, call me out, like, call us out if we say like, oh, we're never going to be able to track that, or, oh, that didn't really have an impact. Like, because I think we've got some compelling examples to show. And again, it's to get to the point of unified customer view, unified revenue view, unified business context, and team enablement, right? And so for the manufacturing, right, we've got, it started at a conference, surprise, right? Case study was presented. Like Jennifer was there. She reacted, collected some vendor materials, right? What traditional CRMs miss, most of the time, almost everything that happened at the event. Like if it's not an email on a leads list, right? So none of that depth, like how excited they were, right? Unless it's the salesperson, like that was in the conversation, feeling her excitement, it's very unlikely to travel to the rest of the CRM, right? As we move forward, right? We've got a site visit, board presentation. This is where I shouldn't even have to get into the details, right? Like these, we all know that these things happen. How many of them, think about in your case, get tracked in your CRM effectively? I'm starting here because this is where every manufacturer I've worked at or helped, think about business, they've got revenue sitting all over the place. Revenue opportunity, revenue actually happening, and they have no idea, right? Related to training and consulting and consumables and parts and service and all this stuff. And if you ask any of the leaders, They will tell you they want to understand it. They want to understand what's going on, right? And again, the whole goal, like they will all agree to, like, I want to get here. I want to understand where the revenue is coming from, where we expect it to come from, where it has come from, right? So, example, right? We stopped at closed one. We're going to miss, $160,000 worth of revenue here, right? If we bring it all together, it's here. And this is the kind of stuff that gets buried in the ERPs or the accounting systems because we're invoicing, people are paying, but it's not associated with any kind of context. To get here, right? The system of how it's capturing data, when it's capturing data is is required, right? Unless you're like a couple people and you've done the work to get it all in spreadsheets. It's either inboxes, spreadsheets, or heads, which is usually capturing this. And then when you have your Monday morning meeting and you verbally like exchange like what's happening, that's the only way you have your completed vision, right? Uh, so this is just kind of like the more complex example of how you get to these multiple layers of views and why it's important to break them out, I think, and understand again who's involved in the process and where they're at in their journey of trust and value experienced, with your business.
Yeah, and that's a great example, like the post revenue or the post purchase revenue, right? Like in some businesses, we think about that as cross sell or upsell, future opportunity, or renewal. Um, uh, some businesses use expansion revenue, in that context. But the um, that's another area where it's typically like a dropped ball relationally, right? Um, the sometimes champions or buyers like dangle like, well, there could be future revenue out there if this goes well, and they are using that as a negotiating tactic. But there is a lot of we do a lot of manual work across the economy trying to solve this problem, right? Of like, once somebody signs with a certain package in a certain situation, what does that cross sell, upsell, et cetera, look like? And being able to look at all of your customers and how they position in this value path, right? Um, Gives you the ability to benchmark a new customer against that, which is to say, if all you can do in the old model is be like, well, they are now in the customer lifecycle stage, and so now it's success or renewal or whoever's problem to generate incremental revenue, and they have a sales process and they have training and they have all that stuff, and it's not our problem, right? No unified customer view. But if we can map these creator, adopter, advocate stages for an individual business and recognize the difference between um, that things like even CSAT, if you are tracking it, or NPS or whatever, and segmenting it. Are you segmenting it by whether they have like they are at the adopter stage, they have surpassed like value creator, which is like we are starting to get what we wanted out of the system, right? And the right time to like talk about cross sell or upsell that is not exclusively like how do we help you achieve that goal is when they are out of that and they have reached adopter, right? Like, okay, the thing that we were reaching for, we have now got in our hands, and we are starting to think in HubSpot terms, like, not are we using HubSpot? It's like, oh, are we getting the most out of it? Could we be doing more here, right? Which is a different question than are we overpaying or are we using it right? Are we using the right tools for the job, right? Those are both post purchase kind of categories of questions that often get thrown to customer success that we don't have the nuance to look at here and say, so we approach it from a like entirely one-off basis rather
Yeah.
than saying like, oh, we recognize that this customer has now passed into adopter and it's not are we trying to get them to zero, it's like they're saying what's the next ceiling, right? Like can we really open this up, right? You want to treat those customers differently and you don't want that to just be all down to the judgment of the account manager, right? Or the account
Yeah.
exec.
Yeah. Or the data, like the usage data, right?
Right.
Which when we don't break it out and we hand it over to customer success and uh, the customer comes in, and again, there's nuance to all this. That's why it's as granular as it is, because the difference between, yeah, HubSpot's challenging for us and we want to get more out of it. And man, we're really loving HubSpot and we want to get more out of it. Like in both of those situations, we know that people go, oh, well, Marketing Hub will probably work for
Right.
you, right?
Right.
You need Marketing Hub. Clearly, that's the answer to either case,
Right.
right? And if I just told you it's not working for me and you try to sell me more stuff, which to the being empathetic to most customer success teams, they're looking at data and they say usage in sales and service and no usage in marketing. They have no
Right.
other context. So that's what they're trained to do, right? Versus you break this out, that's why adopter is different from value creator. And I'm thinking over time that we should end up with some scenarios where this is like a negative number. Like if the negative number should be present in value creator stage because they never got to adopter and they didn't renew, right? Because of that. And what's crazy here, and if you're out there and you think it's not crazy for some reason and not insanity, is that we don't do this in our systems where there's real dollars being exchanged in these stages. We don't track it. Yet we make up dollar amounts related to leads, like lead value. That's just like, oh my gosh. Like,
Yeah.
how does that make any sense that we're going to tie dollar amounts to these stages and hope, right? Versus we're not creating the space to track dollars here. That's actually really like transpiring. I didn't think about that until just now. So hopefully that helped some other
No.
people,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Like, yeah, pipe. I mean, the one of the ones that I noticed years ago that was hilarious is working with a client where, they have pipeline projections, and it's based on they were a TCV business, and so they just were like, well, our average TCV is, X tens of thousands of dollars. It was like high five figures. And so they're like, so it makes sense to just when we create a deal, we'll set that as a default deal amount. It's like, okay, I mean, sure, following you so far. Um, and so then our conversion rate per stage times dollars, like gives you a like rough value of what's in the pipeline now. Okay, sure, like I'm following you with the math. But come to find out that it was an industry where the buyers had an extremely robust procurement engine, right? And so it was not uncommon for procurement to cut 15 to 20% off the dollar value of the like committed contract, so that when that got realized in the last pre-closed stage of the pipeline, right? So it would say $85,000 was the amount up until they generate an actual quote, and then it's like, okay, it's 78,950. and then it goes to like contracting, and procurement just takes 20% off of the top of that, right? And so like those pipeline numbers made in good faith are not reliable if you are reporting on the pipeline and not as the manager like doing the math in your head. Like, okay, the pipeline says $3 million, but it's actually 3 million minus 20%, right? And we don't think about that's a fairly it's not uncommon, but it's not super common scenario. But we don't like even have that amount of rigor, which was not very much, for that post sale experience, right? Like it's just like, oh, what's our renewal rate by segment, and times average renewal amount, and that's how we think about like post
Yeah.
purchase revenue.
And I don't know if we'll touch on it here, but in a lot of other content, I talk about stuff like this uh, because sales gets paid off of this number,
Right.
and nobody's sure who gets paid off of these numbers. Um, so if you want to learn more about that kind of problem, value first leadership, value first revenue, almost every other series, value first humans, we talk about it, but that's often why we're okay with the CRM like stopping here. But what I've seen happen in practice is businesses understand there's opportunity here and they put this number on the heads of this team who has no way to like manage it effectively. So they're just not going to do it. Or on top of the service team that is not trained in how to like, you know, do basic, like this is sales. This often needs to be a sales process associated with these things. And all of a sudden you're putting it on your service team just because you heard your competitor is like 20% of their bottom line is service. And you want to see that happen too.
Yeah,
Right.
or it's treated like a non-sales process where it's like, oh, if they say they have a need, then we get engineering in and they quote on hours, and then we close it or we don't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to touch on one more. Uh, is it the buying committee one? Is that what
Yes,
we want to go
buying
into?
committee will
All right.
this is more not, I don't know if it's more complex. It has a lot of complexity, and we're gonna fly through it. But one of the places where customer journeys as a whole fall down, and that we want to find better ways to deliver value to the business that is going to become a customer and to the individual people who are sticking their neck out to make a purchase with Value Path, is being able to transform from deciding like a company is now a sales accepted lead or a sales qualified lead. Sure, that might be true if they are qualified, right? But that we can go, what most businesses do now is like map the power in the decision, right? So in our example here, we have our primary champion economic buyer who we just have to justify ROI to. We have technical evaluator who's going to give a go, no go on the platform, integration, whatever. We have end user representative who is, in our case here, is trying to solve a problem. And then we have final approver who is mostly like, this decision might bubble up to the CEO in the event that the line item is high enough that they need some oversight and or need to defend it or present it to the board, right?
Right. And they pull up your domain, your web address, make sure it doesn't look
Right.
like your backyard.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
that's
don't
it.
have a security cert error.
Right.
And so like maybe final approver is just a pen stroke, right? But we need to figure that out in this scenario. And this framework allows us to, the example I gave previously of like, we create a rep having discovered that essentially writing the executive summary for the champion that can be the internal document that gets surfaced is an example of like emergent behavior that we would like to capture because we recognize that we have a champion, and for the sake of argument here, and trying to go quickly, let's say, Jennifer Martinez, we recognize as an advocate because she was the champion and buyer in a previous role and has now moved on to a new company, right? So we're saying we've figured out like, oh, she's, called up her rep and said like, hey, I'm now at, I forget what the name of our sample company here is, Enterprise Corp.
Super original.
And enterprise names, and is saying like, we've got the problem that your platform solves. I'm trying to build a case, right? That person is clearly an advocate, right? This is she's bringing her successful tools to the new role, and we need to be able to know what, not just how the power maps out, but how their journey from knowing nothing about your solution, or maybe having negative impressions about your solution, or not wanting to change, goes through like, okay, I'm an audience. I'm listening to. I'll listen to your story, right? To like, okay, let me look at how this impacts me. Let me raise my hand, and in some scenarios, right, in a buyer, when you have a buying committee, not everybody's going to pass through hand raiser, right? And moving into, in our purchase, in our journey here, we may map some specific buyer related behavior to, or specific signals to entry to the buyer stage of like, of accepting or qualifying or approving the aspect of that decision that they own, right? So like Sarah Kim, director in IT, in this case, has signed off on, yes, integration is doable, and we have the project capacity for it in Q1, and so on, right? So like we've mapped out that's how these buying processes work. We've got Sarah Kim on the team in buyer, right? And so like these are dimensions that just pipelining the company loses. Great reps do this. They do it without the tooling and the language and the support of the rest of the organization, particularly marketing, and just don't have like the support and framing in the CRM. They are doing it all again in their heads, relationally, etc. Right? But we need to be able to think about these complex, high friction purchase decisions in this way to better support all of these people's journey from I've heard of you to, hopefully we can get them all the way to advocate. We can get it signed if we at least get them to buyer, and we can help them achieve their goals if we when we get them to value creator, right? Like that is how we deliver on these promises that we're making and really invest in the relationships with these customers.
Yeah. And that part, that invest in the relationships with your customers. Like when you're inside of an organization and you know that like the customer that gives you like 50% of the revenue, but it might end up being at cost because there's so much work happening, there's so much hand holding, like all of these signals that we're going to suggest to you. Like this one, for example, like the different, and this is where AI, like we're not saying any one human like should be doing this. Again, like the best of us, like that are involved in all these processes, try to do it. And some are successful, but as soon as you try to get other people involved in the process, there's no way that it can hold up, right? But this example here, where low signal, brief mention to CEO in executive meeting, the amount of work that goes into these moments where it's like, oh, I'm going to be presenting to the board, right? So give me all the slides, give me all the, like, help me. And then they come back and like, yeah, I basically like 10 seconds. I just said we were working on it, or I got bumped. I didn't get a chance to mention
Yeah,
it, right?
that's the
Like,
one, right?
and this is an attempt to improve internal processes and create better margins at the end of the line because we're spending our time on the valuable activities internally because we know where the value is externally, right? Because that kind of thing, like when everybody's rah rah and you feel so good and then you get bumped,
Yeah.
like it was nobody's fault, but that's the kind of thing that could just take the wind out of anybody's sails, even though there was no given. It's just like internally and externally, everybody like the air gets let out of everything and we just slow down. And, in reality, it just that was not the right moment to try and create the value,
Right.
right?
Yep. And it's again, it's the kind of thing that like great reps know how to do, right? Like they call Jennifer and they say, "How'd it go?" And Jennifer says, "I got bumped because, Larry spent the whole time talking about whatever," right? And you know, uh, a mediocre rep is going to say like, "Okay, well let's talk on Monday, and like let's strategize where to go next," right? And a great rep is going to say, "Oh man, that sucks. I know you did so much work to prepare. That's really frustrating. I'm sure Larry didn't do it on purpose. The is everybody, are you still at headquarters? Is everybody still there? Would it be worth like grabbing somebody before the end of the day?" And I mean, if it would help, I'd jump on the phone, and they're not going to. It doesn't make sense, right? They're trying to be good at their job and supportive colleague to the buyer, and help. This. I mean, sales is one-on-one game, right?
Right.
Not zone defense. But so it would be specific to that situation. But the in Friend Dev Labs' third AI adoption principle is like you've got to scope the data to tell AI what matters, right? A rep will hear, "I got bumped," and hopefully quickly be able to figure out like, okay, what do we need to do, right? Can Jennifer just grab the CEO on the way out the door, or try to prioritize bumping into them in the hallway, or 5 minutes at dinner, or whatever, just to say, hey, let's follow up on this next week. And we need those signals uh, derived from AI, right? From our conversational intelligence, call recording, transcripts, etc., in the CRM to expose them for AI to help us do that analysis and pattern recognition, right? Like if that is just in the rep's head and not in CRM, then we don't really know like that. There's no proof it happened, so it didn't happen, and we don't have any way to act on it in the future. But if we can get those signals into our CRM appropriately, let's just say tagged for now, and see them on the timeline of activity, then we can start to figure out down the line, right? We analyze 1,000 deals, 100 deals, 10 deals. We can start to see those patterns and find them without there being an onerous amount of data entry or even manual analysis work by the team, right? Like we're trying to use AI to help that rep focus on doing those things that they are great at and supporting everybody throughout the process by bringing this structure to the team.
Well said. Um, so we're gonna keep at it with this series. Again, in the next episodes, we'll dive deeper into examples as it relates to each stage. Um, I think what you were saying at the end there, like the signals are there, right? We're just trying to help create the place where you can leverage them and AI can leverage them. And as a business, you start making, better decisions based on real data, real context, and real understanding instead of like, oh, these 1,000 leads came in and we closed 10 deals. And like, it just,
Yeah.
and this is the part that pretty clear to everybody that doesn't feel right. Right. And when you have trouble explaining that to AI, this is why you have trouble explaining that to AI. right? It doesn't make sense to it either. So we're gonna keep digging in. Any final thoughts before we close up today?
No, I think we covered it for now. There's tons of thoughts, but we got to cut it off somewhere.
Yes, we do. So this is where we'll do that. I hope everybody has a great Thursday, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bye bye.